I'm Britt Bingold, and you are listening to Season 3 of Learning Unlocked. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Hey Keyholders, welcome to episode 27 of Learning Unlocked. Today I am joined by Wendy Peterson and Julia.salce, instructional specialists for Gilbert Public Schools, and my two colleagues. We are discussing the second installment of our instructional framework series that we are moving through as a district this year. Even though we are hyped up on coffee and candy corn and can see the fall break light at the end of this tunnel, Wendy and Julia illuminate for us the beauty and the complexity of lesson design. From learning goals and success criteria all the way through to what makes instruction intentional. As we continue to focus on this domain in our district through the coming years, we hope to keep unlocking the main differences between lesson planning and the art and science of lesson design. So with that, I am pleased to welcome back my two dedicated and brilliant colleagues to the podcast to help us discover what it truly means to design. All right, we are back for part 2 of our 5-part series dedicated to our district's instructional framework. And I am joined again by my two lovely colleagues, Wendy Peterson and Julia.salce.
Hello.
Good morning.
It's morning for us. I don't know if it's morning for whoever's listening, but if you are listening at night, we appreciate you just as much if you were listening in the morning.
Or in the afternoon.
Oh, that's true. In the afternoon.
Yeah.
Now I want to sing the song.
Me too.
You love me
In the morning, in the afternoon.
So in the last episode of the series, and if you didn't listen to it, now this is going to probably make more sense to you if you listen to the last episode. It's episode 24. So if you want to be in the series, you're going to backtrack up to episode 24 to listen to the Connecting Within the Learning Community episode, because that's where we really discuss the first part of the framework. And that's the learning community and the essential components that has in instruction. But now we are going to shift our focus from connect to design. So ladies, what are your thoughts on how these two domains still work together to create concrete instruction?
Well, so when we're talking about connecting, as we did in the last podcast, we're really connecting with students is built on trust. And trust is a component of teacher credibility. And teacher credibility is essentially whether or not the students believe you can teach them. And so when we talk about being able to connect with kids, yes, we talk about the relationship building, but a piece of that is being competent as the instructional leader in the room. And so when we are building concrete instruction, we want to make sure that we are showing kids that we've considered who they are, what they can do, and we have designed instruction to meet those needs, built off of things like feedback and assessments and all of that.
Putting those together is so important because through my years in this profession, I've seen some teachers who are just loved by kids, but it's just because they've only developed the relationship. Mm-hmm. That is not our job.
Right.
Our job is to teach. And so this design component means that we're thoughtfully creating lessons to help them learn. And so those two have to go hand in hand, like Julia said.
I also think it means that you're making those connections each year with the kids you have in front of you at that moment, and that you're also designing your instruction for the kids that you have at that moment.
That is so true.
I think a lot of us miss that kind of, I'll just reuse or recycle things, and then when it doesn't work with that specific group, we're like, oh wait, what happened? Well, kids change and they're changing rapidly.
they were already changing rapidly, and now we've thrown in a pandemic. So I think we just need to make sure that we are making connections with the kids that we have and then designing specifically for those kids.
Yeah, the kids are different every single year. So I don't remember any year in the classroom when I used exactly the same lesson that I used before. And even in our jobs as instructional specialists, sometimes we'll hear, oh, you've taught that many times, that'll be easy. And there we are reworking it because we know we have a different group, or we have a different perspective, or the previous group gave us insights that now we want to share with the next group.
Totally.
That is all about the design process.
And that's what makes us credible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because we do look at what maybe a principal's needs are and adjust based on what they've told us maybe their staff needs, even in a training.
Absolutely.
So we always are adjusting, and so I think that's important. Okay, so the first concept under the design domain is called learning expectations. And that as a district, we have a shared understanding of what these expectations are for student learning. So how can teachers lay this groundwork well for learning expectations in their classroom? Because I think learning expectations could be confused with classroom management in some ways, and in some ways not. So let's kind of just chat about that a little bit.
Well,
they can go hand in hand.
They are interwoven.
Right.
And in fact, when we're called out to work with some teachers who are struggling with management, we found, you both can attest, that oftentimes it's really either lesson design and or lesson delivery that is the issue. But learning expectations reset the tone for what it is that we're really doing here. And the clearer the teacher is about those expectations, the more likely that it is that students will actually learn, hence teacher clarity having such high effect size with John Hattie.
Yeah. Well, and we talk with, in learning expectations, we're talking about learning goals, success criteria, learning targets, and all the research for teacher clarity as well with John Hattie. And so it's kind of like teachers have those expectations, but they have to be shared with students.
Right. And that's typically where so many of us have like the greatest of intentions, but and we know, and we know where we're going, and we know what each day is going to be building toward. But if we never share that with the students, we miss the opportunity for them to be active players in their learning process. And students need to own their learning. It is their learning. And the more opportunities we give them to see what we're doing and see why we're doing it and see where we're going, the more relevant each day is going to be from one day to the next.
Well, and I also think attaching again to the connect part, when we include kids, whether they're kindergartners or whether they're seniors in high school, in their education, they feel respected and valued and seen and heard. Right. So the relationship is strengthened, but then the learning is strengthened because they understand what the expectations are and can speak to them.
Right. And so I think that's why the word groundwork is so important. If you don't lay it at the beginning of the year and have it consistently going on throughout the year, that's where a lot of struggles, I think, of teachers, like where they have kids misbehaving or they don't understand what's going on in the classroom. Or if we walked into a classroom and said, hey, what are you learning today? And they have absolutely no idea. It's because that groundwork, that foundation wasn't laid. And it's really hard to get kids on board with some of your design choices or your lesson plans if they don't know what those expectations are and where they're going and what's going to make them successful during this unit, during this quarter, whatever it is.
Well, I'm sorry. It also reminds me of when parents say to kids, what did you learn in school today? And they say, nothing.
Right.
So when I first started, we didn't call them learning expectations back in the day. But when I first started using them with my students,
Objectives or something.
Objectives.
Yeah.
I would say to my students, when you're asked today, what did you learn at school? What did you do at school? This, right here. Let's practice. This is your
come out of your mouth.
And I would tell parents at open house night or conferences or whatever, If your child says nothing, we did nothing. I have never once in all my years of teaching had a we did nothing day.
Right.
Not one time. I do not intend to. So if that's the response, please give me a call so that I can make sure your child understands
Right.
what we were learning for that day.
What
So,
the expectations were
what the
and what the goals were for that day.
correct.
Well, and it also goes to the idea of relevance. They need to know that their learning is relevant, and they need to know that each day is relevant to the next.
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about laying that foundation of learning expectations, I think the groundwork is also the culture of your classroom. It's not just at the beginning of the year you set this culture, but regularly looking at learning expectations is something that should be built into the routine of each and every day.
Mhm.
Yes.
And what that looks like in each classroom can be different, but there should be a standard routine of kids knowing what they're doing that day, why they're doing it, and where it's taking them. And then they need opportunities to reflect on those learning expectations. Where have they been? What do they know? What are they still struggling with? What can't they do? What can they do? And then ways to articulate that. That's really how you're going to keep kids driving and pointing toward kind of that standard set of expectations.
Yeah. So definitely important in the design process. And we all know like designing lessons and units and courses is a lot of work. And so we don't want that work to be fuzzy for kids or for us, right? Teacher clarity is also student clarity. So we're gonna remember that. Okay, so that's the first concept is learning expectations and laying that groundwork. And so the next concept is really where it gets a little, what's the word I want, ladies?
I'm not sure.
Like there's just a lot. There's a lot in there.
It's a big one.
It's like a big concept and there's a lot of keywords, but all of them are critical. So it's like one of those things where you're like scaffolding and the formative assessments and feedback and make sure you have this. And there's a lot in there, and it's true because lesson design is complicated. It's critical. But it is complicated so I think we first need to make the distinction between lesson design for teachers and lesson planning. So how can we differentiate those two things? Because I think it's important to do so because planning doesn't really seem as complicated as design.
Yeah, it's not. And I used this example when we worked with the administrators and ambassadors. In my classroom, most of the time, and remember that everything we don't want people to do, I have done. I've had a lot of time.
Me too.
So
we learn from our mistakes and we grow from them.
So lesson planning meant that in my lesson plan book with those little teeny tiny squares, some of you might remember them, it would say things like Monday, read the Scarlet Ibis. Tuesday, finish Scarlet Ibis, answer questions 1 through 6 at the end of the chapter. Wednesday, read The Most Dangerous Game. And that was my lesson plan.
Was it your short stories unit?
It was my short stories unit. And then you guys are making fun of me.
No. I had a short stories. I had a poetry unit that was a rocket.
I know.
Until I realized I needed to weave those all into other units.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so once again, everything that we don't want people to do.
We've done.
And that was certainly one of the things was doing, really just a to-do list, and not a very good to-do list of what we were going to read each day. Now, I'd like to think that my actual lessons, that I brought something more than just read Scarlet Ibis, answer these questions. But it certainly wasn't intentional design. It was accidental design.
It was accidental excellence.
Oh, well, I don't know if I go that far, but okay. All right. It was for sure accidental.
Anything else on planning?
Well, so I think I go back to the national board certification process for me was really when things started to click. I think I was in my 4th year teaching, and I sat down to write the first paper, and there's this statement that basically gets used over and over and over again. And it is because I know this about my students, I'm doing this, and therefore I'm going to see this.
Okay, I want you to say that again, because when you first told me that, I was like, that is brilliant. Yeah. So say it again so people can get ready with a pen or pencil or their phone on their cord or something. Yeah. Unless you're driving. Don't do that if you're driving.
Because I know this, I'm talking about our students, I'm doing this, and therefore I'm going to see this, or I hope to see this. And really built into that is whatever your pre-assessments have been with your students, whatever your knowledge of them, both as learners, their interests, what motivates them, all of that plays into what you're going to do in that particular lesson and what you expect to see as a result. And what you expect to see as a result is going to come through the form of formative assessments that you're doing during the lesson and then afterward. And so I think when we talk about design, I go back to Wendy's square, I remember those, and they never gave you enough room.
They didn't.
No, like the week they gave you really is like a day. Maybe.
I know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking if we live in that image, going back to each one of those squares and typing in this statement, because I know this, I'm going to do this, and therefore I'll see this. If we even did that every day,
Oh man, that would take
for every lesson, that would have
further.
that would have a great impact, because I think it's leading people towards the idea of intentionality, as Wendy said, and that you have, and designing.
Well, and personalized learning, which is part of design.
Right.
Like you said, knowing who they are, knowing what they care about, knowing what their interests are, personalizes the lesson.
I think what you just said was brilliant, as so much of what you say is brilliant, Julia. This is a lot, and we don't believe, I think I'm speaking for my two colleagues, we don't believe that we're just going to transform from lesson planning to lesson design overnight.
No.
It's a learning process.
Mm-hmm.
So when Julia says, even if you just use this statement, that would make a big change. Right. So if you're like, I don't know where to start. Start there.
Yeah.
And we actually used this statement with the administrators last year when they were developing their PD plans for their campus.
Right.
Administrators, because I know this about my staff, we're going to do this, and I hope to see this. And so it's just a functional statement. It's one of the things that stuck with me through that process, and I think can be applied to a lot of situations, but definitely with students, it's a given.
Well, it can be applied. I mean, even with your students that you're doing like enrichment or interventions with kids, like, if I need to do an intervention, it's like, because I know this about what this kid can do, right? I'm going to do this now, or can't do, right? Now I'm going to do this, and I'm hoping to see this outcome. So I think it's a good statement for really a lot of those things that we talk about. We talk about intentional instruction, right? It needs to have enrichment. We need to see student growth, right? And it all kind of goes back to what the standards are, which I also think is different from lesson planning. From when I remember my first year teaching, I don't really remember looking at standards. I'm not going to lie.
Sweetie, there weren't standards when I started teaching.
No, but I think when I was teaching, there were.
There probably were.
They had just come out.
They weren't the new ones, but they were like. Something.
Yeah.
Arizona, whatever.
Yeah,
Right, but
Arizona
it was always
standards.
planning. What my lesson planning was, just like Wendy said, it was the content.
Yes,
it was content, not skill driven,
right.
and that's design is skills driven.
So I think that's the distinction I really wanted to get to here.
It is the distinction.
Is that we're looking at that's why I said it's just like it's so many things that are different from if you just sat down and did a traditional lesson plan.
Right.
And so when we think about it, we got to make sure we know that we have obviously a road that we're traveling and that we're scaffolding, right? But we're also basically doing all of those things towards mastery of those skills. So
I know.
That's why I started with it and I was trying to search for a word. I was like, design is.
I know.
The
it's
candy
complex.
corn and coffee did not kick in for my colleagues. I'm like, people, I need words.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, the next concept. Oh, we're not going to the next concept. Nope, we're going to stop. We're talking about instructional. Nope.
We're talking about intentional instruction.
There's not enough coffee, listeners. We need to have more coffee. Okay, what makes instruction intentional? Oh, we kind of already touched on this, but really, can you guys give me a little definition? Like, what is intentional instruction?
That is when you are specifically looking at the needs of your students and the skill that you need to teach, and selecting the best instructional strategy for those students at that time with that skill.
Julia's had enough coffee and candy corn.
The candy corn has finally kicked in.
Okay. All right. So here's the follow-up. How can teachers develop the skill or continue to develop the skill of intentional instruction design. So we talked about first starting with those questions, that nice question stem. And then what are some other ways they can start to build this towards more mastery?
Well, to me, this is the beauty of a PLC. I don't have to go it alone. If we have to go it alone, it's a lot. And I think when you're sitting down with a PLC, it becomes much more intentional than what were the first years of my teaching career, where I was all alone, all by myself, and not only did I not have standards, but nobody even said, okay, you should start with a short story unit, and then you should go on to Romeo and Juliet, and then nobody even told me that. So I was all by myself. In a PLC, you can refocus each other on the intentional instruction, looking at the data of your students. And I'm not talking about district benchmark data, state data. I'm talking about it could be that, but
that only comes up every now and again.
Right, it's your data that will drive what you're teaching and how you're teaching it. And so to me, that's how you continue to develop that skill. And then like all other skills, practice. Just keep doing it. And then when you think, I've kind of got that down, add to it. And there's plenty to add. We're still learning.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, and I think too, when we're talking about developing intentional instruction, I see in those PLCs, I am just thinking of the PLCs I've been on. I imagine them coming to a point where they say, okay, we know our kids need this. Here's this skill. This strategy didn't work.
We tried this one.
And then not knowing other ones to try, or not having a big bank of strategies. So what do you do once you've identified what the student needs are? And then you start to talk about, well, we need to teach this. We know they always struggle this way. What's the best strategy to use? And so I think if you want to continue to develop that skill, you have to continue to grow your bank of instructional strategies.
Right. Which is what I think is so fun about teaching. I love growing that.
Me too.
Every time I see something new, somebody do something I've not seen before, I'm like, dang, I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
Right. That's the being teachers. We borrow.
Right.
We borrow, and we manipulate and make it work for our kids. And I think that's the fun part.
Well, and most teachers I know are more than happy to share.
Well,
like, go ahead, use that.
This idea of intentional instruction is like a really big shift for a lot of teachers too. Like from going on their own island with no standards and just doing their own thing, and then moving into PLCs, and now moving into like these standards and skills and priority standards and skills. Like if you've been teaching 20 plus years, you've seen this large shift happen in education. And so I think putting some examples and some words and some ideas around this concept is super helpful, because I think there was at first, pushback on this. Like, where's my autonomy?
There still is pushback on this, but I was a pushback with where's my autonomy.
I mean, I can see that because we used to have so much,
Used to pretty much do whatever you wanted.
So there's like that idea of the autonomy feels like it's gone, but what Julia is saying is, no, it's not. You still get to choose how you teach those standards and skills but you're just working together as a team to be better for kids.
Well, and you're gathering data on whether or not those strategies work.
Right.
So that you begin to gather, I almost see it as you begin to categorize the strategies that you do have into these work well. These strategies seem to work really well when we're doing this. These seem to work really well when we're doing this. And that's really what a PLC is supposed to be.
Right. So we need to remember, as a person who struggles with math, data is a scary word. So please remember that data applies to anecdotal data as well as more hard data. And so if I do a particular strategy and my students aren't engaged with it, or that's information I can take back to my PLC as I continue to plan. On the positive side, if I do something and they love it and they're wanting to do it again and I know it works instructionally, that's data that I can take back to my PLC as well.
Yeah. You're fine. Okay. I don't have a cough button. It's fine. Yeah. So I think there's just a lot when it comes to instruction being intentional. And I feel like there's just a little tweak for some teachers that have been teaching a really long time and are like, I've always been intentional with what I do. And that's not what we're saying when we talk about that. We are saying that now we do have these standards and skills that we have to make sure the kids master. But don't feel like you can't not have fun still or autonomy
or should choice. Still be fun.
But you just need to make those choices wisely and gather data on them and discuss them in your PLC.
You should be able to say, because I know this, I chose this,
oh my gosh,
and therefore I hope we're seeing
we
this,
are
right?
Go full circle. But I can't let this go without telling you that I have had teachers say to me, remember when teaching was fun?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's sad.
Why isn't it fun anymore?
Right.
Because if you can't have fun in this job, I don't know why you would stay. Right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, some of the autonomy is gone, but that's for the good of kids.
Right.
If you're here to have your own personal traveling show, which I sometimes was at the beginning, that you're in the wrong job. This is to help kids learn.
So based on research done
based on research doesn't mean it can't be fun.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that's one of my soapboxes.
Well, and that's why I want to talk about it, because I feel like I felt like that a little bit too when the new standards came out. Like, wait, I really liked this.
I love my poetry unit.
Well, or like I made this big tree and it was gorgeous for To Kill a Mockingbird, and I had in a corner, and it was like, and then I was like, well, I don't really know what I was doing with that, but
I have to build my sugar cube pyramid. Oh yeah, no.
And hey, maybe you can do that still, but you've got to make sure you figure out a way to make it fit with your standards.
To be able to justify it.
Yeah, and be able to measure it somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of put that in there for those of us who had some anxiety when we transitioned into this kind of new educational realm. So our last concept of the design domain is instructional strategies. And I say that really excited because we love it.
Yeah.
Our department has dedicated itself to basically seeking out high-yield instructional strategies to help teachers meet students where they're at and move them forward. However, when we say the term high yield, what are we saying?
We're saying that it produces a large learning effect on students in the classroom. And we know that because the research supports it. And we're not just talking about the research of John Hattie, which we talk about a lot in our department because he gets very specific. But we're also talking about Marzano's research and his high yield strategies. And so when we say high yield, we know it's been proven to move kids forward in their learning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, so how can teachers determine which strategies will be best when they're trying to figure out how to do something? I mean, that's, I think, where a lot of teachers get stuck. I could give a teacher a bank of strategies with all the definitions and examples all day long, but if they don't know how to apply that to student growth, they don't know.
And that's where the PLC comes in, and it goes back to a comment that you guys made earlier about teachers having a lot of experience and thinking like, I've always been intentional with my instruction. This is the opportunity, and this is why PLCs are good, because you're not going to necessarily know which strategy is going to work best for a particular skill you're working on. But if there are 3 or 4 of you together talking about your experiences when you've taught this skill in the past, what has worked for you in the past, what hasn't, and then you line that up with your bank of strategies, you're able to really pull the collective wisdom and knowledge of the PLC together to make the best choice you can at that time.
Right.
Well, and so we want to remember too that you can say, oh, I want to try this strategy and try it and say, yeah, that didn't work as well as I wanted it to. That doesn't mean it was a failure. It doesn't mean that you set kids years behind because for that one thing you were teaching, the strategy didn't work. So some of it is trial and error, and that's okay. You're not taking kids back. It just wasn't quite as good as maybe you hoped it would be.
Well, I think remembering that just about everything teachers do moves kids forward, whether it's a little bit or a lot. And we're just aiming for those higher leaps
Right.
forward.
And that's why it's called high yield, right?
Mhm.
Oh, huh.
They all yield. Just about everything we do yields some type
They
of
yield
learning.
except
but-
for
Well,
boredom.
boredom.
Yeah.
Patty ranks now at negative 0.33. So that's not good. But
Right.
and that's where the fun comes in. It's kind of
Right.
like but they're still fun.
Yeah.
We can't bore these kids
Right.
and ourselves.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
there were days where I was like, I hate what I planned. Today I'm bored.
Right.
And you're like trying to get through the day and you're like, this was the worst. And I was
Mhm.
always so thankful for another day.
Mhm.
So I could correct what I did.
Right. And that's kind of the beauty of it,
Teaching.
right?
Yep.
You can
Yes.
fix it.
With our job, we go out to school and I'm like, oh, that didn't go well. Well, I'll see them in 2 years. Like,
Right.
it just makes me not, you don't have that like next hour to
Mhm.
make it up a little bit better, or even that
correct.
next day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of instructional strategies.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about a teacher, and I may have talked about her before, who decided to try something new based on something she'd learned from me. And she was so excited, she even invited her principal in to watch her,
Oh, jeez.
and it bombed.
Yeah.
It was bad. And blessedly, the principal is the kind of principal who was like, good job for trying something new. It didn't work, but dang, good risk taking.
Yeah.
The teacher was honest with the kids.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't go quite like I planned. She went home, she rethought, and she figured it out, and she went back and said to the kids, that didn't work. I think I've got it today. Let's see how we do. And the kids felt like they were in and part of the plan,
Mhm.
like we were talking about earlier. And she revised in such a way that made it work for her and the students, and they all felt like they were part of
Yeah, community.
and that's what we want, and they had a great time.
And that's teacher credibility.
Right.
When you can talk, when you share with students the thinking behind what you're doing, your own humility, like, whoa, this did not go well.
Here's
that's
what I wanted out of it, but clearly that's not the direction we went.
automatically they see that there's an intention to what you're doing, that you're trying to achieve some type of effect, and you want their feedback. And that really is that's harnessing the power of teacher clarity and teacher credibility.
Well, because then they're noticing that their feedback is valuable
Right.
to you. And what is he? What is it? John Hattie that says it. The feedback that students give you
is more important than the feedback you give students.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
really,
right.
I mean,
That is part of the feedback.
yeah.
And
And that's what you take to your PLC.
And
That's what you take
right.
home the next
And we
day.
can teach them to do it. I'll say it again and again and again. We have to stop keeping secrets from students. We never used to tell the kids anything.
I know.
And now I tell them almost
I
everything.
know we do. We start with the unit, like whatever it is, the final test, performance test at the beginning. We break it down.
Unpack it.
Exactly what you should do.
Right. So that's why we did have some, Julia, where did you get mental Velcro from?
Heidi Hayes Jacobs.
Okay.
Her curriculum mapping.
I love that
I
idea.
love mental
Love
Velcro
mental
too.
Velcro. They have
I'm
something.
impressed you popped up with that.
I
With
know.
Heidi
You put me
Hayes
on the
Jacobs.
spot in my
Boom.
brain. It's the
It's
candy
the
corn.
candy
It's the magic of
It's candy corn season.
listeners, we are recording this with a bucket of candy corn and coffee. So just
Okay,
so
it
you know.
sounded like you said a pocket of candy corn,
no,
or like
it's
a bucket
Yeah,
of
it's a
candy
whole
corn.
jar.
Yeah.
It's quite large. Okay, so
Yet it's still disappearing.
Yet it's still going.
Thanks to Julia.
and hey, I've been snacking. Okay.
Candy corn is one thing that does not tempt me.
So,
Woohoo!
but coffee does. So.
Yeah,
The
well,
pecan pie
Yeah.
coffee
Yeah,
is
oh my
good.
gosh, that's true. On top of it, we have pecan
Pecan
pie
pie
coffee. It's fall over here in Arizona. Even though it's hot, we're making it work.
Happy fall, y'all.
Yeah.
Happy fall, y'all.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I really want to just quickly touch on is we keep talking about instructional bank, toolbox, strategies. Where do they get that? Where can teachers that aren't in our district find that? John, they don't know how to answer it.
So okay, no, I have an answer.
Doing these live.
I'm gonna plug a book. Can I do
plug
that?
the book, and then I was going to plug his website.
Yeah. So the Beyond Quadrant A book.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote it.
Oh shoot!
It's a late. I think it's late. It's
Hold on,
over.
we have some in the cabinet. Okay, keep talking.
That particular book, I think, for when I first took this job 3-4 years ago, that particular book I loved because it was talking about rigor relevance, but in the very back, the author Bernadette Lambert.
And I'll link it into the show
yeah.
notes for you guys so you can look at it.
The second half of the book has a whole appendix of instructional strategies
Are
that promote,
good.
that promote rigor and relevance. And so this is this for me was a great tool, a great resource
We
to
use
look
it
at.
all the time.
Mhm.
Yep. And then Hattie, who we love, John Hattie, has his MetaX website, which I'm going to link for you guys, that has a list of his high yield strategies and his medium yield. I don't know how. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then lower yield strategies. But you can then take a look at, you can like sort by effect size and look at what the top ones are.
Yeah.
And do a little bit of research and be like, oh, I didn't know that reciprocal teaching was so high. And what is that? And can I use it? So I think they just need to know. I mean, I didn't know any of those things until I got into this job.
Well, and we tell teachers often that is now our job, is to find good stuff for them.
Right.
When I was in the classroom, I didn't have a lot of time to read professional books or professional articles.
And neither are our listeners right now either.
Right.
You know?
And so that, if you don't have instructional specialists in your district or coaches in your district, yes, one, start working on that.
Yeah.
But two, the book Julia mentioned, the website that Britt was talking about, that is your best bet. Throw into a Google search instructional strategies and things will come up. Jennifer Gonzalez with Cult Pedagogy and Edutopia, they usually have things that you can take right back in your classroom.
All of the Marcia Tate book series, the Worksheets Don't Grow Dendrites,
Love
Shouting, those have really good take out this, put in this strategies as well.
See, I asked them the question. They had absolutely no idea. Now that I can't stop talking about it. Well,
oh my word!
I'm going for more candy corn.
She's going for more candy corn. No, that's exactly. I think that's what we need to do is for those teachers that don't, like small districts that just don't have those people to take the research and turn it into a strategy and or go out and seek out strategies. Where do they go and where do they look?
Right.
And just to end on, Wendy found this really awesome strategy site called Harvard's Project Zero, or Julia found it. I don't know who found it. So one of them did.
We co-found it.
Yeah, we actually found it at different times and forgot that we had shared it.
So it's Harvard's Project Zero Strategy Toolbox. So everything that we've talked about here, I'm going to link in the show notes for you guys. So that way you have a place to start because you can't have these great learning. You might have great learning expectations and a design plan that you're ready to go with, but if you don't have a big box of strategies when things fail or don't work, it's hard. It gets discouraging, and you will find that a lot of these strategies are really fun, and they're really fun for you and for the kids. So I just don't want to let that go without talking about where do we even find this stuff if you don't have these people that can give it to you. Okay, ladies, are we ready? Are we ready for rapid fire questions?
Yep. I'm so
I
ready.
don't know if I'm ready. Okay, here we go. Number 1, lesson design is
And art.
Oh, it is.
An art and a science.
Oh.
Good mic drop.
Collective teacher efficacy right here.
Which is PLCs. This is what we are.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, the listeners now either love us or they have turned off the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2. What is the worst lesson you have ever delivered but thought it was designed super well before you delivered it?
Is that looking at it with my knowledge base now or
Yes,
my knowledge base
right.
then?
No, your knowledge base now.
Oh, go back to the whole poetry unit type of thing. I remember this giant unit.
Mine was so brilliant.
It was me too. Me too. I had this great, and I'm sorry, any of my former students who are listening.
I feel like I need to send them letters.
I know.
I apologize to all of them.
It was this, we were reading A Raisin in the Sun, and it was this poetry unit that was supposed to go along with A Raisin in the Sun.
Hey, at
and
least you were
I was
trying to
connecting,
combine those
yes.
two units.
But it was a side independent project. And so they created these beautiful poetry books. And I just thought these were going to be the most amazing things.
Right.
And they looked beautiful. But I'm not sure it taught them any. Actually, I know it didn't teach them anything. They did write some poetry. They tried their hand at analysis, but it was...
And I'm guessing they learned about alliteration and
Right.
essence and
Which
iambic
should be, I think, the
pentameter.
standards, like,
But
for the poems.
that's not,
Yeah.
I don't... My memories of this are actually more about where I failed teaching teachers.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, and all the time, I feel like this did not turn out
Mm-hmm.
the way I wanted, or as deep as I wanted it, or they didn't get. It really is all the time, and I don't think that the people in the trainings would necessarily think, "Oh, well, that was awful."
Right.
But knowing that I could have done better, that I could have driven it home better, that maybe the strategy I chose to use wasn't the best strategy, but I wanted to use it.
Yeah.
So it's all the same things that I would see in a
And I
classroom.
feel the same way. Sometimes I like really suffer from imposter syndrome in this job.
Oh, all the time.
You know, where I know what I'm talking about, but it's not coming out of my mouth correctly. And you're in front of a group of 70 teachers or 30 teachers, and you're like, oh man, do I look like an idiot?
Yeah.
I think we've all been there, but we think we know what we're doing. We walk in, we've designed it, we've really tried to think through all the different bumps that could go wrong, and we just sometimes the unexpected happens, and we do our best. You know?
And it can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter who you are.
Well, I always share what I think are my really brilliantly designed lessons or trainings for teachers, and I share them with my friend Wendy, and we work on this term I have an issue with, which is complexity. And she's always reminding me to keep it simple, and sometimes I take her advice and sometimes I don't, and when I don't, I typically find that I should have. So, but we're all
complexity something else.
It's enchanting. I found a quote by Keats that says, I don't know, but something about how your complexity enchants me, and because Julia sometimes sees that as a negative thing,
right?
And I see it as such a positive contribution to our team. Although I do say, okay, whoa, stop, Julia. Okay,
stop, don't go on.
I'm not getting it, so I don't think other people are going to get it. But that's also the beauty of having each other as a PLC. So
yep, that's perfect.
Right.
I really just wanted to talk about, like, we've all been there.
We've all been there.
Don't feel like you're alone.
Yep, and we're still there.
Yeah, we're still there, and we're teaching teachers. So, okay. What are your top 2 components of a well-designed lesson?
And I mean this in a very specific sense, student engagement. So they have to be doing stuff all the time. It's with Julia terms, the active learning experience, students have to be doing something. That to me would be like number one.
Yep.
Actually right after the clarity.
Yes.
What is it that we're doing and why?
Yeah, I think it's when you walk into a classroom, it's the intentionality of everything is clear. Yeah. That's really the two things are just like Wendy said, that clarity, and then are the students involved in their learning the entire time, or are they passively watching their learning happen?
Is the learning about them, or is the learning about the teacher?
Yeah.
Right. Well, learning you should know what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, whatever.
See, it's like a love-hate relationship in here.
Mostly love.
Mostly love.
It's like love, grumble, love. Grumble.
Yeah.
Don't forget love candy corn.
Yeah.
Grumble.
And coffee.
Coffee. Yeah. It's it's like a real
So
family.
those are like the real questions about design and lesson design, and then I just completely went off because I saw this on the internet. I thought this was great. Okay. You have 30 minutes to spend $10,000 inside one store. Where are you going?
Home Goods.
Yeah. That was the first thing I thought of.
So what are you?
too.
Was it really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, and they're going together. They have 20 guys. This is dangerous. $20,000 inside Home Goods between Julia and Wendy.
Although for me, Dillard's is right up there. If I did Dillard's, I could get clothes and home stuff and stuff for my granddaughters. And
True. But if you go to the Home Goods that's attached to a TJ Maxx,
right, which the Home Goods I go to is.
You could really.
Yeah. I probably won't be able to work the rest of the way from pondering this question. Yeah.
I've now ruined the entire days of work. Now Wendy wants to know where she's spending her $10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What is your favorite season?
Oh, please.
Fall.
Fall.
Do we call it fall?
Autumn?
We call it fall. We haven't
call
used
it
autumn.
fall.
It's not a...
Yeah, we call it fall, but I thought you preferred autumn, Wendy.
I do actually. It just sounds nicer.
You know what the joke is in America? We say fall because leaves fall down. Everywhere else in the world says autumn.
Right? Yeah,
like,
I think they'll, and of course it depends. Are we talking about Arizona? Are we talking about other parts of the country or the world?
Right. No, where we live now.
But I love winter in Arizona. I have to say that finally the temperature is tolerable for me, and we get a little bit more rain.
Oh, we go on more walks.
Right, but there's something about the idea of fall.
And the colors.
Well, I like the idea of it, like, it's symbolic.
Yes.
The pieces of the year are falling away.
Oh,
see, and
I
I
feel
like
the leaves fall down.
Right, because it's a season of change, and I feel too it's like the season right before the holiday season. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of hope and joy that comes with those the holiday season. So for me, that's why I love fall.
Yeah, which is why again we're drinking pumpkin pie coffee and eating candy
corn.
And our office smells like what do we have?
Pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice in our diffuser. Yeah, it's. We decided it was fall, even though in Arizona it's still
hot.
It's 100 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cooling down, so that's exciting.
There's hope in the morning and in the evening.
Hope in the morning.
Yeah, it is. Regret your sweater choice in the morning, in the afternoon season. So okay. Thank you, ladies. As season 3 and 4 progress, we are going to be discussing the remaining 3 domains of the instructional framework. Remember that the whole instructional framework is connect, design, instruct, assess, and reflect. So we have covered connect and design. And so the last 3 we're going to talk about are instruct, assess, and reflect. If this is of interest, please look out for those episodes with those words in uppercase letters in the episode titles. Any final thoughts, Julia, on this? Because Wendy just left the building. I don't know what she's doing. It's fine.
No, I just say keep it simple. That's something I have to tell myself all the time. Yeah. There is an art and science to lesson design, and it's not going to be mastered right away, if ever, really.
No, you're always
and so
growing, I think.
I'm going to come back to that statement because I swear by it. If you just approach everything with, because we know this, we're doing this, we hope to see this, I think you are spot on where you need to be with lesson design.
Yeah, and I'm going to just say it's like that Coco Chanel quote, before you leave the house, take off one piece of jewelry. In your lesson design.
Yes.
I think sometimes we put too much in and because we're really excited about something, and we need to remember to take off that one last piece before you leave.
Yeah.
And just so you have enough time for students to process and reflect and all those things within that lesson.
Yeah, I agree. I love that.
All right, so we're going to sign off here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this conversation about lesson design and how it differs from lesson planning and how complicated it can be, but also how fun it can be. So have a great fall, everybody, and I hope some of you are headed to your fall breaks soon, wherever you're listening. We are headed to ours next week, so we're very excited.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about lesson design. If you've listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to Professional Growth and then clicking on the button that says Digital PD Courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. We are distributed by Libsyn, LIBSYN, to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Audible. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation with your students. And remember, you can do that with great lesson design. Stay kind and courageous. And I'll see you next time.